Welcome to Strip Coverlet, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Fort, and we are here for the first in a 154 part series as we will be journeying poem by poem, sonnet by sonnet through all 154 eventually of Shakespeare's sonnets. But this is um, a video that will appear in two playlists here on the channel, the Shakespeare sonnet playlist, as well as the Poetry Discussions playlist. The Poetry Discussions playlist already over 150 videos. And by the way, while we're talking about it, this is part of National Poetry Month. National Poetry Month, a poetry discussion every day here on the channel. Sundays with Sylvia Plath, Mondays with William Blake, Edgar Allan Poe on Tuesdays, William Shakespeare on Wednesdays here with the first of the sonnets. Dickinson Darkly on Thursday, which it looks like I'm already going to have to forfeit and just do a regular poetry discussion tomorrow. I am an idiot. I'm sorry. I know. Frost Friday, where we will be continuing the New Hampshire collection, and Slumming Saturdays with Bukowski. So yeah, a poetry discussion every day of the month during National Poetry Month. Also, real quick, I have an essay coming this Saturday on my personal channel, a link to which can be found in the description below. If you like philosophy, the video essay is going to be called "We Must Think of Sisyphus." Now, obviously, this is a play on the phrase "We must think of Sisyphus as happy." We must imagine Sisyphus. Pardon me, because we must imagine Sisyphus happy. It is a little bit of my take on that sort of thing. But we have the first of Shakespeare's sonnets here in front of us, and we should get to this if I can get my mouse to work here. Okay, so I want to put this out there before the first read through. Now, I highlighted the end rhyme scheme because I think it's interesting as we go to remember that in Shakespeare's day, those end rhymes were rhymes. It's just a little bit of it's interesting to me to look at the things that would have rhymed in Shakespeare's time and consider not only are they goofy English people, but with goofy English accents, but the language and pronunciation of things has changed itself over time. And I am going to preface this as well by saying that my thick Midwestern tongue is going to struggle through this. Do not laugh at me. You can laugh at me if you want. It won't hurt my feelings. Also, Sonnet 1 is obviously one of the first 17 sonnets. The first 17 sonnets are known as the procreation sonnets because they are aimed at goading a young man into getting married so he can have babies. And we will talk about this at the end of the poem. So, this is the poem. From fairest creatures we desire increase, that thereby beauty's rose might never die. But as the riper should by time decrease, his tender air might bear his memory. But thou, contracted to thine own bright eyes, feed'st thy flame with self-substantial fuel, making a famine where abundance lies, thyself thy foe, to thy sweet self too cruel. Thou that art now the world's fresh ornament, and only herald to the gaudy spring, within thine own bud bury'st thy content, and, tender churl, mak'st waste and niggarding. Pity the world, or else this glutton be, to eat the world's due, by the grave and thee. Now, an interesting factoid about William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare from Stratford upon Avon. He also had a cousin. Not a lot of people know about Shakespeare's less fortunate, less successful cousin. His cousin was actually from St. Joseph, Missouri, where I went to college. So, one of the ways that his cousin, Billy Wigglestick, made a living was just by translating William Shakespeare's writing into American English. So we have here that translation. William Shakespeare, Stratford upon Avon, to Billy Wigglestick's St. Joseph, Missouri. Good looking peeps ought to get it on more, so that the more people there is, the more pretty there is. And you're not getting any younger. So get you a son to be pretty when you ain't. But so long as you're just self loving, keeping all the hunk of you to you, nobody else gets none of that, and there's a plenty. And you're only doing it to yourself. 'Cause you young and pretty now, and it's the season for loving. Others, not your mirror or your palm, you stingy bastard. 'Cause we'd like to keep some pretty around here. Do your duty and pass on your genes, bro. This poem from Fairest Creatures We Desire Increase. If people are going to be making kids, mightn't it be the prettiest ones that we would like to have around? That thereby beauty's rose might never die. Because if only the ugly people are, you know, getting it on, soon everybody will be ugly. But as the riper should by time decrease, you're not getting any younger. His tender air might bear his memory. If you don't have a son, bro, there's gonna be nothing left. So I think that it's important. I think you get the point from there. This poem is about a young man who would have his way courting ladies, would have probably his pick of young ladies, but he's not doing that. He's spending all of his time to himself. Now we won't say doing what. We won't say what energies they are that this young man is propagating, but he's spending all of his time and his beauty with himself. Um, and I think it is necessary to understand that Shakespeare lived in a much different world than we do. For example, his first poetic contributions were made because during a plague outbreak, something with which we are familiar today, during a plague outbreak, there was no theater. No one was going to the theater. Life was precarious. You could die from the plague. A lot of people died in childbirth. A lot of children didn't make it. During Shakespeare's own life, one of the queens that was around was Queen Elizabeth I. And she refused to have children. She refused to have children. And it put the kingdom in something of an existential crisis. That sort of idea that the next generation isn't promised. Nothing is promised, but the next generation certainly is not promised. So, we might read this poem and think, Jesus, Billy, leave the kid alone. And to understand that there are 17 sonnets like this, meaning there are 230-ish lines of poetry directed at having a young man, spread his seed? Kind of weird, bro, right? That's kind of the takeaway, the immediate takeaway in a contemporary mindset. Kind of weird. Leave the kid alone. And I think part of that is that in the West and in the West today, we put such an emphasis on individuality. Whatever the life is that you want to live it. And we have that, where is it? Abundance, right? We have abundance. making famine where abundance lies. We are in a world of abundance, so we can afford to put the individual above all else. Previous generations, previous epoch could not quite do that. If you didn't have kids, someday there might be no one to till the fields, right? Civilization is really a precarious thing. Civilization is really on a knife's edge. And it was especially back then. Well, I can't say especially because back then they certainly had it easier than, many easier than many generations prior to them. But certainly back then, if everyone in town that knew how to make gloves, like Shakespeare's father, if everyone in town that knew how to make gloves died or moved away, all of a sudden everybody's hands start getting chapped in winter. Winter becomes a whole lot longer. Winter becomes harder to survive. And that's a microcosm with something such as gloves. I mean, think about if all the guys who brewed beer decided to move away or die. All of a sudden, much different society. And here's the conversation I want to have now. If we were to write poetry so urgent as this today, what would it be about? Probably it wouldn't be about encouraging someone to have babies. But you pull off the shelf Billy Collins, for example, a contemporary poet. Urgent would be one of the last words I would ever use to describe Billy Collins' poetry. Charles Bukowski, one of my favorites. Charles Bukowski. Not particular urgency in the lines of Charles Bukowski. What existential crisis to society would we write about today? I'm not sure I can put a finger on it. I think that literature, poetry, has all turned so individualistic that it would be hard to put something out there without it seeming propagandistic. I don't know, let me know. But that is all I have for this, the first of a 154-part series. If you like what I do here, hitting that like button lets YouTube know to share this video with other poetry lovers, other literature lovers. Literature is all I talk about on this channel: poetry, short stories, novels, etc., novel read-alongs, writing, plays, things like that. So if you find yourself here by chance but not design, consider hitting the subscribe button in order to stick around for more. And if you want YouTube to let you know when these videos do go live, hitting that bell icon does that for you. I have 30 poetry discussions in 30 days during the month of April. This is the third year in a row that we are doing National Poetry Month, and I hope to have you back tomorrow for the next one.